Hello friends, my name is Aaron Hillian. I'm a celebrant and chaplain with Tuckers, and we have all gathered here together today to celebrate the life of Kenneth Maxwell Wragg. I know he's known as Marto as well, and a few other names I know, and passed away at the age of 62, leaving behind many that love him. And I know that each one of us would say that 62 was way too young an age to die. Today, of course, is that final milestone marker in the journey of Kenny's life. He did live a life that was full and rewarding, a life that gladdened and touched and enriched other people's lives, and that's the very reason why you're in this service here together today, because of that special meaning that Kenny had brought to each one of your lives. So on behalf of the Tuckers team and all of your extended family members and friends, we'd like to express our sympathy to his family. Of course, today we think of his lovely wife Margie. I know, married for over 37 years, known each other for many more years on top of that as well. And I know, Kenny, that would say to you, less time for murder. And of course the children and partners, to Danny and her husband Mark and her mum Margaret, to Katie, to Matt, to Meggie and her husband Anthony. And I know Anthony is unable to be with us, he's in Orlando, so we do welcome those that are joining via a webcast today. And Lexi and her husband Philip, to the grandchildren, to Hannah, Adam, Logan, Riley, Kobe and Darcy, to Lachlan, Kenan, Clancy, Cora, Christos and Sophia, to his siblings, to Diane and Lynn and Ian, Gary and Susie. Of course, to Margie's brothers, both Peter and Michael, and sister Neen, and of course all of the extended family members and close friends. Our kind and loving thoughts are with each one of you today. Of course, there is others that are joining us via a webcast, so we do welcome each one of you today. And I do know that it's times like this, it's always a little difficult to try and find the right words to say, but I truly believe that your presence here together today is a wonderful way of showing your love, your appreciation and respect, not only for Kenny, but for each one of his family members. So thank you so much for doing that. And also on behalf of the immediate family, we'd like to thank everyone for being here, and a special thanks has been asked to share with for the rehab staff at McKellar, to the acute neuroscience ward at Geelong Hospital for their wonderful care, their love and care of not only for Kenny himself but also for the family as well. It's been greatly appreciated. Of course, when I met with Kenny's family, and what I loved about that time was there were some beautiful, wonderful memories that were shared, and there was lots of smiles in there as well, and even laughter. And I know that it was full of gratitude and thanks for a life that has been well lived. So for those that have loved deeply, there's always the question of how do we face death when someone that we love has passed away. And of course, it's with love in our hearts, it's with tears in our eyes, and I do believe with thankfulness and gratefulness about the gift that it has been of his life into each one of your lives today. I think I'm not particularly suggesting that Winnie the Pooh is a philosopher, but I do consider him having some spoken words that I think are just absolutely wonderful. He said, "How lucky am I to have had something that makes saying goodbye so hard." And I know that it's times like this, and particularly for family, I'm thinking here today that how difficult it is to say those words of farewell. And each one of you here have shared a unique relationship with Kenny, and reflecting on that, you'll also grieve uniquely. And I truly believe that funerals are for living, they're for each one of you as we join here together today in sharing the memory of his life. It's part of what we're doing here in sharing the memories and the stories, and about the love that you've shared in your lives as well. And it's about Kenny's life, his love, and the memories that each one of you have and that he's placed within your hearts. And I just want to remind you that no one can ever take those away. They're yours forever. You know, I think as we join here together today, acknowledging Kenny's life with gratefulness and thankfulness, I know, in making your lives richer as well, that's probably one of the biggest compliments that you could ever pay to him. So thank you so much for doing that today. I want you to look up at his face, and I want you to see that smile on his face. And I know that today he'd like to be able to be remembered with a smile on your face. And I know that can be a little bit difficult to do, but perhaps it's the smile at the recognition of a life well lived. Thanks for being my dad. Thanks for being my husband. Thanks for being my friend. Whatever that connection is, and it's about that thankfulness for his life today. You know, things like ideologies, politics, and religion can separate us, and but it's love that is really holding these things together here today. It's about that thankfulness and gratefulness for his life that has been well spent. Today is part of the sorrowful part of it and sad and grief-stricken moments, and we have to be able to turn that to a smile, because I know that he would really like to be remembered with that smile. So there'll be some memories that are going to be shared today. I think that'll be quite common for everyone, and of course there's going to be other memories that are shared that will be quite unique for each one of you, just as your life was connected. So I'm going to invite some of the family members to come forward and share in Kenny's journey from their perspective. So I'd like to invite Phil to come on forward. Thanks very much, Phil.
It's okay. Very fitting. In the words of Kenny, fuck, can I have some silence? Give me a word, any word, and I'll show you how the root of that word is Greek. How about eulogy? From the Greek meaning evlogia. Ev meaning well or true, logia meaning words. Words of praise. There you go. I am Philip, Kenny's son-in-law, also referred lovingly and affectionately by him as his dwarf Wragg. I first met Kenny through weightlifting. We started talking over the spit he was preparing for a competition after party. We bonded over our love of cooking them, which we went on to do together countless of times over the duration of our friendship. He, of course, gloated that his beef was the best, while as a good Greek boy, I knew my lamb was better, which he finally admitted to only 4 weeks ago to many. We also shared another interest in love, his daughter and my wife Alexandra. Ken was the fifth of 7 children, born to Stella and Clary in 1956 here in Geelong, born Kenneth Maxwell Wragg, known affectionately as Kenny and Marto, brother to Lynn, Gary, Diane, Colin, Ian and Sue. Kenny Marto grew up in Geelong, living out his childhood years in Barnfather Street. He attended Tate Street Primary School and by all accounts was a suck. On his way to school, he would steal flowers from people's gardens to give to his teachers. He, of course, admitted these stories when telling his children years later about his mischievous upbringing, insisting that he would walk 20 miles barefoot in the snow, only to let it slip many years later that his school was at the end of the street. There was a neighbour across the street who would religiously sweep his driveway and street front every day dressed in fluffy pink slippers. Well, what do 4 young boys do when they see a man in fluffy pink slippers? Fill a paper bag full of dog poo, set it alight and ring the man's doorbell. You all know what happens next. Probably the first of Ken's business ventures was to take pigeons to school to sell, which earned him some reasonable pocket money. He of course kept it quiet that the breed of pigeons sold was a homing pigeon, so upon their return home, he would take them back to school and resell them. One day, one of them, which had a broken wing, found its way home 2 days later by foot. He had them for quite some time until his mother Stella finally got sick of them and asked him to get rid of them. She put up with it for a few more weeks until surely enough they became part of the dinner menu as pigeon pie. After primary school, Ken went to East Tech, where on numerous occasions he wouldn't even reach the school gates. He would employ his sister Diane to write him sick notes, which she'd forged with Stella's signature. Once when he was genuinely sick, Stella wrote a sick note, but she was promptly called up to the school to be questioned about the authenticity of the note, as her writing didn't match all the other sick notes. He and Diane were busted. On another occasion, one of the teachers caught Kenny smoking and smugly called Stella to the school to discuss what he had discovered. "I know he smokes. I'll bloody well buy them for him," she said to the teacher, who was devastated that his breaking news wasn't so breaking after all. Ken was married at 18 to his first wife, Margaret. They had a beautiful daughter, Danielle, and separated a few years later. However, for consistency's sake, he met his current wife, Margaret, at the Railway Hotel owned by Nancy and Graham Bravo. They moved to Hamilton, where they married at the Stirring Pot restaurant, which is a fittingly named venue for Ken's character. They then moved to Warragul, and 3 years later, Katie came along. Another 19 months later, Matthew followed, and they returned to Geelong when Megan arrived in 1987, followed by Lexi in 1989. On their 8th wedding anniversary, Ken told Margie to get dressed up. This old romantic was taking her out. He ordered a taxi, and Margie walked out to the front door to find a limo waiting. She was both delighted and excited. Off they went to the North Lane McDonald's. Ken had many jobs over his life. His first job was at Mates as a salesman. He sold insurance for A&P and was a taxi driver by night for Bay City cabs. He then started a career in office equipment, which later led to his interest in computers. He started developing software for chiropractors and small medical clinics, and finally moved into developing software for the aged care industry. This led to the move to Melbourne in 1994 and saw him opening up his own business, ACF Software. Ken built on this business to the business known today as Thor Technologies, which brings many of you here. Ken wasn't the serious type. In fact, he hated fancy dinners and fancy hotels, just generally anything formal. While still living and working out in Hamilton, Dad had to go out for a dinner to impress some business associates at the nicest restaurant in town. They served pumpkin soup, and it dribbled down his shirt. He promptly dropped his spoon and proceeded to drop his head into his hands on the table, where of course his elbow hit the spoon and flicked pumpkin soup everywhere. In his fluster and embarrassment, he accidentally picked up the red wine bottle instead of his wine glass and necked it down directly. Recently, Ken took Margie along to a conference, which concluded with a masquerade ball. Ken, being the clown of the group, took the dress code to a new level and arrived dressed from head to toe as Uncle Fester from the Addams Family. Again, awkward at the face of a formal gathering. He certainly did have a deep passion for pranks. Ken loved finding ways to traumatise. His goal in life was to make others laugh at almost any cost. Be it wrapping your toilet in Glad wrap, which would go undetected until it was far too late, gluing cotton wool to a beer can to make it look like Santa had lost half his beard during his stopover on Christmas Eve. Ken would find the good in any situation. His coping mechanisms always involved humour, and his healing involved laughter. It was the best medicine. We found a post that Ken had made on Facebook a few years ago. It read, "I would like to die peacefully in my sleep like my neighbour, not screaming and crying like the passengers in his car." In 2003, Ken made the life-changing decision to end his suffering from Crohn's disease and have an ileostomy bag. He set up for days in his hospital bed, making lists of positives about having his bag. His list included giving your bag to someone and asking them to have a shit for you, hanging shit on the Pakistan cricket team, literally, being asked to empty the contents of your bag at the supermarket, and taking it literally. Enough about this shit. Ken loved a good debate, provided your views didn't oppose his. The Liberal Party was his passion. He loved to campaign and would free his entire schedule and calendar for them. This included birthday parties. He once asked us all to join him and Margie at the local Diwali festival. It was a little out of character for Dad to be interested in such a festival, so excitingly the family went along. We quickly arrived at the realisation that he wasn't interested in the festival.
And the reason we've done that is because anyone who knew our Ken knew how colourful his life was. The way he lived, the way he joked around, and, well, you know, most of what came out of his mouth was pretty colourful as well. And you're all here today because some of his colour touched your lives as well in some way or another. And so I just want to start with just some random words and phrases that you might connect with Dad, and if you do, feel free to yell out, you know, yep, Marto, whatever. So here we go. Deadpool. Go Cats. VB. Smokes. Monty Python. Aeroplane Pilot. Prankster. Tempter. The Look. Bullshit, Matthew. Veggie Patch. Jerky and Schmackos. Linus. Homemade tomato sauce. Barbecue calamari. Spit roast. but not as good as Phil's lamb. Hard worker, workaholic, German shepherd, cockatiel, dance, cocky dance, generous, tough guy, marshmallow softie. All those old farts. Liberal Party. Big boats, big TV, big dog, big stories. Bullshit. Big bag of prawns, big camera. Dimple. Feisty. Shiny head, sleeping dad, cheeky kids, red lipstick. West Roosters. Stoma plug. Snoring. Armchair. Rolls Royce. Clever bugger. I'm Jewish. Burnt wiener. Margie, my love. My boy. My girls. Kenny Marto. Orange Pa. Parsy. True blue. That's his colour. My dad. So I'm just going to speak from the heart to honour my dad today because, to be honest, I work in radio and ministry and I speak and write all the time, and today's probably the first time in my life that I've had no words. So I've struggled to put all of my journey with Dad into words, but because there's just so much attached to it, which is, bizarre given what I do, but usually people can't shut me up, and I think I probably got that from Dad. So this is by far the hardest thing I've ever had to write, and so I hope I do him proud. Because my mum and dad split up when I was 2, and I didn't get to see him from when I was 6 to when I was 16, so I don't have many childhood memories with him, but the ones I do have are really good ones that have stayed with me. I remember being little, probably 3 or 4, and Dad could be a bit sneaky, and so he would pick me up from Mum and we would go down to the Cunningham Pier steam packet area, and there was a guy that sold crayfish, and that's not cheap, but we would buy one out of the van and we would sit there just together on our own eating a whole crayfish. I don't know if you knew about that, Margie, but we did. The other things that we would do were I remember going fishing at one point, and I remember staying with Dad after he married Margie and just thinking how awesome she was, because you see her superpower is that she can speak like Donald Duck, and to a 5-year-old kid I can just like this, but she can talk doing it. I can never do it, and I just loved her so much. And I really love you, Margie. You just loved Dad so well his whole life, and Dad wasn't always the easiest person to live with, but you just loved him. And in the final days, Margie would climb up on the bed with Dad and just hold him and just sob. And I'm so thankful that because of you, I have my beautiful sisters and my little brother. The clearest memory that I have of Dad was when I was 6 years old. He'd got his pilot's licence, and so he took me on a weekend that ended up being a lot of firsts. My first ride in an aeroplane. Actually, he co-piloted the plane. I was so excited to be in an aeroplane, of course, and in the sky, and I remember saying to him, Daddy, go through the clouds, and I don't know kind of what I expected, but the next minute all of the windows just fogged up and it was just grey, and I was like, no, Dad, take me through the clouds, I can't see anything. And he's like, this is the clouds. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was kind of expecting some fantasy fairyland with these puffy clouds, and maybe I could jump out the window and bounce along or something, but that's all we got. And within about 5 minutes I was airsick and just chucked up the whole rest of the flight all over the floor. I'm not sure who cleaned it up, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't Dad. And he gave me a really special weekend. He was actually, I remember him being really connected, and there were more firsts that weekend. I got to meet my little sister Katie for the first time. He took me to church for the first time because there was a short period during Dad's life where he explored faith for a while, and I remember going into that church and feeling really safe and loved. I remember having communion, and when we got home he gave me a big children's Bible, the big thick ones that are like illustrated, and I remember he sat me down on his knee and told me all about my Father in heaven, who loves me, and I still have that Bible. In fact, I brought it today, but I've left it in Mum's car. And it was a really tangible possession for me that I've kept me and Dad connected for all of that time that I didn't see him, and in despite all the ways that I've missed having him as a dad for so many years, and even though his beliefs ended up taking a different path to mine, the greatest gift that a parent can give a child is the knowledge of the love of Jesus, and he gave me that. He gave me that anchor that I still have today, and I'm so thankful that he was such a good father that he did that in that moment. It took me a long time to understand the significance of that, but I'm so glad that he did. The next time I saw my dad, I was around 16, and I discovered that I now had 3 beautiful sisters and a little brother that I never knew I had. And that day I went to the footy. We met him at Calcallo and then headed off to, I think it was the G that we went to, and it was that famous game between Geelong and Collingwood where Gary Ablett took that specky of the century. We were about 10 rows back. I'll never forget it, and it was so fun, and doing something that Dad loved on that day was really really cool. And that's probably, as you've heard Phil talk about, one of the things I love most about Dad was his sense of fun. He was always teaching us new jokes and pranks, and that it's okay to have fun. Probably not always at other people's expense like Dad used to do a lot. So some of my best memories of Dad's are things like waiting for him to start snoring in the armchair in the lounge room while Katie, Megan, Matt and Lexi raided Margie's makeup so that we could graffiti his face with lipstick and stuff and take photos. I'm sure there's a few floating around. Dancing with my dad at my debutante ball, and also at Meg's wedding. A couple of years ago, for the first time in my life, Dad and Margie moved close by, and Dad's workload was more relaxed, and he'd often take me through the veggie patch and show me what was growing. I know what you're thinking, that there were no medicinal herbs, just fruit and veggies. He sent me home with silver beet and often capsicums, because Adam just loves to eat them raw like an apple. He's just a weirdo, but I love him. The last couple of years, I was blessed to be more connected to Dad than I have been in my whole life, and I'm so grateful for that time. We spent a lot of years away in Sydney when I was working in Tally and stuff, so this last couple of years has been really special, and he was going to help me to set up our veggie patch in the new house that we're building at the moment. So I guess now I might just have to go to Plan B and ask Christos if I can steal some of the seeds out of the garden, thanks buddy, and plant them there to have a bit of Dad in the garden, and he can help that way instead. So I just want to say, Dad, thanks for the dance, and I'll say you've knocked off for a smoko and you'll be back later on. Hey, True Blue.
I'm glad you explained the one about the red lipstick. Thank you. I love all the little one-liners, though. There's a huge story that goes along with every single word that you mentioned before, which I think is wonderful. And it's great to be a part of all of that, part in that story and the memory as well. To continue, we're going to invite Katie to come forward, please.
So I'm not going to stand here and tell everyone else about my dad, because I don't think there's any point. You guys are here because you knew him. You've got your own memories, your thoughts and your perceptions of who he was, because he was someone different to every single one of us here. I just want to say a few words directly to Dad. Dad, you gave me my love of poetry, especially Banjo Paterson. You let me stand on your feet to dance up and down the hallway and around the room, and then again one last time as an adult at my wedding. You introduced me to Rogerson Hammerstein's Carousel, and through that you reminded me that I'll never walk alone. You gave me so many headaches with our very different views on politics and modern society. You stood quietly supportive when I dated men you didn't like, and you shit-stirred the ones you did. It took me until adulthood to read that little tell. You told us repeatedly that people who watch soap operas are morons, and then unashamedly watched Passions on a regular basis. You could crack a joke about anything, and if you were standing here right now, I'd be waiting to hear you ask if it was anything serious. You had the worst fashion sense I've ever seen, and your insistence on wearing socks with sandals broke our brains. You drove me crazy, feeding the kids ice cream and lollies before they were ready, and reminded me that it's a grandfather's prerogative to spoil the babies. You told me on national TV that you would support me if I came home pregnant, but if I wanted a tongue piercing, you'd do it yourself with a 3-inch nail gun. You kept your promise regarding the babies, and it was never quite game enough to pierce my tongue. Riley, Kobe and Darcy adore you. You're their pa, and they love you as much as I do. Thank you for being you, for your stubbornness, love, generosity and laughs, for never telling Mum when you busted me sneaking a VB after school, for giving me your inappropriate sense of humour and always reminding me that you're proud as long as I've done my best, even when I think I've failed. This is about the time you'd look at me in exasperation and say, "Wind it up, Kate." So thank you for being my dad. Do as our beloved Banjo Patterson said, "Ride boldly, lad, and never fear the spills."
Now, Matt, would you like to come forward?
I'm blown away with how many of you are here to help us celebrate the life of Dad. There are so many memories that I'd love to share with you, but I'm just not going to. Just joking, as you can already see, I'm not that much of a comedian that Dad was. Being the only son had its challenges, but it was also really rewarding. I got to go on countless early morning fishing trips where, to this date, Dad is still my biggest catch. That's right. When Dad was teaching me how to cast, as I've cast, the hook got lodged directly in his nostril. Needless to say, he quickly showed me how to do it right. My school holidays were spent with Dad. I got to go with him to clients, spend the long drives chatting. I got to learn a lot about history, different types of land formations and politics. That's right, at a young age, I was taught about politics. At the time, I used to be bored out of my mind, but as I matured, I grew to enjoy these precious moments with Dad. Dad was extremely proud of Lexi, Meg and I with weightlifting. There wasn't a competition where he wasn't in attendance. He injected himself into the sport. If there was something that needed to be done at the stadium, you knew that Dad's hand would be the first one up. This included driving a bus full of annoying kids from Hawthorn to Sydney for junior nationals. Dad also shouted the meat and started cooking all of his famous bits of competitions. Dad was a workaholic, and when you wouldn't find him outside, he was sitting behind his computer. I remember when I was a young kid, I would sneak into Dad's home office and watch him program. I thought I was being real stealthy, not letting Dad know I was there, but this wasn't the case. As after a few minutes, I'd get, "Well, if you're bloody going to be here, you can go and get me another beer." To say I was in awe of the work Dad did would be a gross understatement. I was fascinated. He was proud with the programming, and there were times I'd been woken up in the early hours of the morning to Dad being excited about what he'd just done. And when I mean early hours, I'm talking about 2, 3 o'clock. I got to watch the software grow to the point that Dad gave me the business a few years ago. But it wasn't all fun and games. Working with Dad had its challenges. Not so much with learning the software, but Dad's appointment making. So I'd be out there all day seeing clients, and I'd get back to Mum and Dad's house to be asked why I didn't see a certain client. I'd reply, "Well, you never asked me to go see that client." And he goes, "Well, I'm bloody well telling you now." There are so many memories I have with Dad, more than I could ever have the time to share with you. But most of all, there are fresh memories of the last 4 months. I miss the smile on Dad's face every morning as I got to either the hospital or the rehab centre with a cappuccino and hotcakes for him. They're short memories, but they're going to last. While we were going through Dad's computer over the last week, we found a letter from Dad that read, and this was saved on his desktop and created back in July. After looking at my life and trying to work out who has been my best mate and most faithful friend, excluding my beautiful wife, it is my only son. It's clear that Dad knew his time was near and he wanted to make sure we remembered how much he loved us. He also made it clear how much we needed to remember his sense of humour. Lexi and I, on separate occasions, have found different folders that were freshly created only a couple of weeks ago that had certain types of movies in them. These were movies that were just freshly downloaded. I'm not going to say what the movies were, what the names were, or what genre they were, but it was enough to give us a good laugh. Well, it's time that I have to say thank you for being my dad. I am honoured and proud to be your son and best mate. I love you and I'll miss you every second of the day. I'll miss your cheeky smile. Rest easy, my old man.
Good job, man. Thank you so much. And Maggie, please.
I've spent many hours pondering what to say about Dad, and I've come to the conclusion that my words can't do him justice, but I'm going to try, because he was an incredible man who impacted countless people, which is evident by all the love in this room. Dad was a generous, kind, loving, hilarious, generous, cheeky, intelligent, generous, sometimes grumpy, true blue Aussie bloke. He was as quick as a whip and almost always up to something. He would get a twinkle in his eye and you just knew he was brewing up a cheeky joke, a prank, or a special surprise, and nothing could hold him back, even major surgery. Almost immediately after being discharged from hospital after his first bowel resection, Dad demolished the bathroom in our house and then decided to hide some surprises in the walls for future owners of the house. Instead of normal things you'd find in a makeshift time capsule like a photo or a newspaper or something, Dad put some empty beer cans, an ileostomy bag, an empty one, and a Ziploc bag full of icing sugar so they would think it was drugs. At our wedding in Florida, Anthony and I were cutting the cake and Dad burst through the crowd. He made sure to stay back behind everyone and he burst through the crowd saying, hang on a second, points to the fancy wedding knife we were using and he goes, that's not a knife, pulls out a huge hunting knife and goes, this is a knife, just to show his character. Dad's surprises weren't always the best kept secrets. You could see it in his face and he would get so excited that he would unintentionally drop hints, like when they were planning on flying over to Florida to surprise us for our wedding. Pretty much the moment he decided to surprise us, he started asking questions about Florida and said things like, you're gonna need to help your mum apply for a passport for a trip to Ireland, and you may as well apply for mine too while you're at it. We didn't have the heart to tell him that we figured it out in less than 3 seconds. He did pull off one really amazing surprise in 2011 though. He told me that he and Mum were going to Tassie for a week. He started sending me gorgeous photos of things they were seeing in Tassie, and after a couple of days he called us to tell us he'd bought a special gift for Anthony and I and it would be arriving via FedEx at a specific date and time. Well, the delivery day came and we waited and waited at home to sign for this mystery package. All of a sudden, we hear somebody shouting our names, so we went out onto the balcony to see Mum getting out of a taxi and Dad standing 2 floors below us with his camera. They were never in Tassie and he took the photos from Google. We ended up having an amazing weekend showing them around Nashville. I'm sure a lot of you know that Dad had a massive sweet tooth. Growing up, he always had a giant bowl of lollies sitting on the table that nobody else was allowed to touch, although he would often accuse us of sneaking them when he couldn't remember just how much he binged on them the night before. He also loved ice cream, sponge cake, pavlova, Boston bun, anything sweet really. To give you an idea, Mum was telling me a few weeks ago just how much Dad has lost his appetite over the past few months. Yet when I bought a Boston bun, Dad ate a quarter of it in one go. And when I asked Mum how much of his favourite hokey pokey ice cream to give him, I expected her to say just a scoop or 2, and she said, oh, he really doesn't eat much anymore, give him 3 big scoops. Something you may not have realised, although it's glaringly obvious right now, is that Dad was a big collector. It wasn't stamps or coins or any sort of knickknacks, no. Dad, right along with Mum, was a collector of people. He collected friends, family, bonus children. Everywhere he went, he made friends. He was constantly telling us about his good mate such and such. And when we would ask where he knew them from, he'd say, "Oh, he works in the motel your mum and I stayed in once." Or, "Oh, she's from such and such shop." Or, "Oh, I walked past him in the bank one day." They weren't just random people to him. They became true friends. He genuinely cared. Something about his witty jokes, his cheeky smile, and his kind, loving eyes drew people to him. Everywhere he went, he drew in the randomest people, and they became like family. Dad was fiercely protective of the people he loved. That was evident with how much he hated my husband, Anthony, when we were engaged. To be fair, he hadn't met him, and Anthony was stealing his little girl and taking her to the other side of the world. The first time they actually got to meet in person was at the airport a few weeks before our wedding. Dad was very apprehensive of this yank coming to steal me away. He held his hand for a handshake, and Anthony reached out and hugged him. Everyone that knows Dad knows he was a hugger, so this gesture meant more to him than it would to most, and Dad practically melted into a puddle on the floor. He fell head over heels in love with Anthony, which he loved to remind me over the years, especially on late-night phone calls. Dad never did seem to be able to grasp the concept of time difference between here and Florida. I can't even tell you the amount of times I've been woken up at 3 a.m. to a phone call from Dad. Usually it was bragging about a prank he played or a surprise he was planning for this person or that, but the calls always started with, "What time is it there?" "It's 3 a.m. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know. Well, I'll let you go then. Well, I'm awake now." And they almost always ended with, "Maggie, you have no idea how much I love you, my little girl." Dad, I want you to know that I do know how much you love me. Thank you for always showing me that I was so loved. Thank you for loving Mum so fiercely, and for always telling me that you loved Mum more than anybody on the planet, for being the best example of the love that I deserve to be given, and also of the love that I'm able to give. Thank you for your wicked sense of humour, your storytelling right up until the end. Thank you for being as strict as all get out and shaping us all into the best human beings possible. Thank you for always telling me how proud you are, Dad. I'll always do my best to make you proud until we meet again.
Good job. Beautiful, thanks.
Mum just wanted me to add to Megan's story about making random friends that apparently Dad used to be one to pick up hitchhikers and bring them home to stay. That's good. I'm a little nervous, which is unlike me because I normally like to talk a lot. To begin with, I'd like to go off track for a moment and acknowledge Mum. This woman gave Dad the best years of his life and made his final months, which were surrounded by fear, anxiety and pain, the utmost comfort and loving. Dad was always very forthcoming with his love for our mum. I'm sure if you have him on Facebook, you've seen the endless YouTube links of love songs posted to her at 1 a.m, and I believe this incredible woman deserves to be acknowledged. Mum, you ensured he was comfortable, comforted, and knew that he was adored. Thank you for giving our Dad the respect and dignity in his final days and for being the most incredible wife to him. I know you are grieving a deep, unspeakable grief, but we're all here for you to get you through this. In the words of Dad, you did good, kid. Our beautiful Kenny, 62 years of happiness with you in our lives filled with laughter and love. There's been a common theme in every discussion that we've had reflecting on Dad here today and with everybody else, and that is his generosity. He would literally give the shirt off his own back if it meant somebody else wouldn't go without. He would give money even when you insisted you didn't need it, you'd find it in your bank account 2 days later. He's bought washers, dryers, fridges, given furniture just to see somebody else's home furnished. To this day, there is a huge screen hanging from the roof of the Victorian Weightlifting Stadium. I'm sure we, personally, would have loved to have seen a few more grand finals on that at home, but apparently they needed it more. That was always the way. Someone else needed it more, and so he'd send it on its way. When we were young and we were particularly struggling with money, Dad came home exasperated because the people living behind us had no food in the house. Mind you, they were on benefits and also earning money cash in hand, so they were probably doing better off than us. We were a family of 4 kids living at home. Dad emptied the contents of the pantry to give to this family and promptly left us with empty shelves. He didn't really think it through, but it sums up his nature. He was also very generous in donating time to babysit people's children. You'd arrive to pick up the kids only to find a very dishevelled mum, clearly at breaking point, to learn that Dad had gone to bed within 15 minutes of you dropping the kids off. With his generosity came his over-the-top gift-giving, though he could never wait until the actual event to give you a present. For many years, though, he was really quite far off the mark. A lesson for all of the men in the room: when your wife says to you at Christmas, "Surprise me," a kitchen appliance or vacuum cleaner is not what they meant. Save yourself the head injury from that appliance being flung across the room and opt for a gift card instead. He was pretty socially awkward at times and didn't have the best ability to comfort in a crisis. He just never really knew what to say or do. We had a beautiful golden retriever that we had to put to sleep. We had a pretty traumatic end to his life and the entire family had come to say goodbye. We finished at the vet, and as we were leaving, my phone rang. It was Dad, and I answered the phone sobbing. Hi, you okay, kid? Dad, we just had to put Sebastian down. Yeah, I know, so I bought you a dog. Do you want to come see it tomorrow? It took us a while to get our head around it, but we love our Sally dog. I recently learned that his generosity knew no bounds. I really treasured the earrings that him and Mum gave me for my 21st birthday, bless you. But I'm sure my cousin Nathan will never stop rubbing in that my earrings have nothing on the car and $500 cash that he got on his 21st. Dad always did say Nathan was the favourite. Dad passionately hated telemarketers. His business meant that his phone would ring off the hook all day, so when the calls would come in at 7 p.m, which was prime documentary watching time, he would be furious. We would all take great delight in hearing him losing his mind at the poor, unsuspecting person on the other end of the phone. One night I dialed in Mum and Matthew on a three-way and then rang Dad pretending to be from a tele sales agency overseas. I knew all his trigger subjects and I addressed them all. He was screaming, sweating and pacing, demanding to speak to my manager and have their phone number. So I read out his phone number. It tipped him over. Mum and Matthew were trying hard to stifle their laughter and I finally broke cover. He eventually saw the funny side, but I'm sure with every call thereafter he questioned the authenticity. He was an incredibly impatient bastard who would turn up to something hours early because he just could not contain himself. I hope there's no real estate agents or police here today because this story is my favourite. When Mum and Dad purchased their forever home in 2015, Dad simply couldn't wait until settlement, so went out and purchased an illegal garage remote and would just rock up to the house and let himself in, taking measurements of bench tops, scoping out where he'd put his furniture and just generally wandering around. He was so excited to launch into his renovation, but we were terrified the current owners would waltz in and find this strange man just leaning on the bench staring at blank walls, and knowing him, he'd probably run himself a bath too. He was a terrible painter. Every corner of the house has horrific cutting in. I don't know if he ever passed grade 1 colouring in because he simply could not stain the lines. But he would stand back, crack a beer and say, "How fucking good does that look?" We'd all stand back exchanging looks, staring at these architraves covered in paint where there should not be paint, but he was totally blind to it. I never thought we'd look fondly at those walls, but now I never want to see them change. When I bought my grandma's house last year, him and Matthew got in the day of settlement because we didn't dare break into that one beforehand, and they did the single best paint job I've ever seen. It looked fantastic, and I guess it was his final project. He reached perfection. His bad jokes, his cheeky, crooked smile, and his shiny ball head will not be missed. His $200 lolly binges, which he would not share a single jube or sherbet bomb from. His love for scotch, and the need to hide your good scotch in fear he'd get through a $300 bottle of Glenmorangie Signet in a sitting. And his love for gadgets. His love of the Liberal Party, and his endless bullshit talks on his hate for Daniel Andrews, his constant campaigning, his ridiculous Facebook posts. We'll miss them all. His pranks. Oh, will we miss those pranks? They usually involved water. On the day of my Year 12 formal, Megan was lathering me in fake tan. Suddenly, the bedroom door bursts open and there appears Dad with a pressure hose in his hand. And despite my screams, he hoses me down from head to toe. I was beside myself, but $60 for a professional spray tan later, which I only just learnt Mum had to pay for. I was bronzed, but I was jaded. I was going through my phone recently and I found a text from him. I quote, "I'm going to be in big trouble with Mum." Yep, she was sunning herself in the hammock and I threw a pot of ice water on her. No fucking sense of humour, that girl. "Dad, I'm sorry for peeing in the esky when I was 9 and not owning up to it, so you thought that it was Matthew." I'm sorry for closing the brand new car Duco on the brand new car door on your fishing rods and punching a hole in the Duco. I'm sorry for sticking my chewing gum onto the side of the next brand new car. I'm sorry for accidentally selecting Labor in my first ever election, even though you coached. I'm glad I said that word right. I'm glad that you, even though that you coached me for days on which political party, beginning with Al, I was supposed to elect. I'm sorry you couldn't bring yourself to speak to me for 3 days after that. I'm sorry Julia Gillard ruined your dream of me becoming the first female Prime Minister. I'm sorry that I smacked you when you caught that crab in Merimbula, which I'd claimed as a pet. You helped me name the crab. Entree, you suggested, which I thought was a beautiful name until I learned what an entree was when you ate him. I'm sorry you aren't here to see the people here to farewell you. I know how loved you were, and I'm sorry that we won't see each other until we meet in heaven. Have a scotch for me. Christos is looking over your garden. Soph has eaten all of your lollies, and Phil has got the spit well under control. We'll miss you, we love you, and give my grandparents a kiss for me.
Well, wasn't that fantastic? On behalf of all the family members, thank you so much. And I know there's a lot of stories to go. We laughed at many more the other day, and I know that I can't touch on any of those. In the meantime, I'd like to invite Craig Onadachi to come forward, please.
Thank you, Aaron, and to Margie, to Danny, Katie, Matt, Maggie, Lexi. It's an honour to be here on behalf of many of Ken's friends to farewell him today. Ken was a loyal friend, a dedicated friend, a committed friend, a very energetic friend, and a sincere mate. As you've heard already today, he loved the Liberal Party. And this might come as a surprise. I see many dedicated Liberals in the room today. This might come as a surprise to you, but Ken had opinions on things. And Ken wouldn't hesitate to ring myself, or Matthew Guy, or Ted Baillieu, or Michael Kroger, and give us his opinions. I completely agree. He doesn't know what time of day it is when he has to ring somebody. So Matty would know that if at 1 o'clock in the morning he had this idea about what Liberals should be doing, he would ring me and talk to me about it. And generally, he was right. But he was also a bit of a rascal, our Kenny, a bit of a scallywag. He was a very competitive Liberal, and I recall in the 2014 state election where pre-polling took place in a place called Lorimer. And many of you know when you go to a polling booth, there are signs and posters and banners up everywhere. Well, Ken, being the competitive Liberal he was, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and took up every square inch of space outside that polling booth from 100 metres that way to 100 metres that way. And when the Labor Party turned up to put up their posters, there wasn't a square inch available. And he stood there on guard, a bit like Gitmo in Cuba, marching up and down to make sure nobody took up any of that space. And he stood there proudly after pre-polling opened at 9 o'clock this morning, and the Labor Party standing there with their posters not knowing what to do. And he wandered up quietly to me and said, "I fucked them on Dutch, I fucked them." Ken had opinions. We've just recently in Australia welcomed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan, to Australia, and you all saw on the TV the hysteria, the love, the passion for them, the people getting out early in the morning waiting in lines to see them, and they're quite excited when Harry and Meghan walked down the street. That excitement is nothing compared to the excitement of Ken Wragg when John Howard visited Lorimer. I think Ken was there early in the morning, waiting patiently, excited that former Prime Minister John Howard was visiting the place that Ken had set up with all those posters. And we expected Ken to be opinionated, to be strong, to be energetic, to have views, to tell John Howard how we're going to fix the state of Victoria. And when John Howard got out of the car, Ken froze. And I've never seen Ken lost for words. And he stood there quietly, almost like a little boy, and just glared at John Howard and stared. As we walked down the street to the beat of the drum of the United Firefighters Union who were harassing us that day, Ken just marched along alongside John Howard and just looked. And we stood in a room and I said, "Mr. Howard, meet Ken Wragg." And Ken put his hand out and went, hello. And that was as best as Kenny could get out that day, but I know it made his day. And he still talks about the day that John Howard met Ken Wragg. Ken would tell a story about a political opponent, and as the story goes from Ken, this political opponent was spending some time at a local hotel in Mernda. And she was there meeting lots of people. I'll clean this up, Lexi, don't worry about it. And she was meeting lots of people. And as I understand the story from Ken, there were two men that were suitors for her that night, quite keen on this political opponent that was at this particular pub in Mernda. And as the story goes, according to Ken, this particular political opponent couldn't decide which of those two men she would invite home. So as the story goes, according to Ken, she invited both of them home. And what happened after that, one can only imagine, but Ken had his views on what happened after that. And he would take it upon himself to remind this political opponent that he knew. He knew what happened. He knew the whole story behind it. But he went further than that, than to remind her, and she got so upset about it, so upset. And he was active on Facebook reminding her that he knew what happened at the Mernda pub that night. But it wasn't enough for Facebook for him. It wasn't enough to see her in the street for him. It wasn't enough to tell people this story. He went further. And he produced this T-shirt that he wore proudly when he saw her, and it says, "I got a 2-for-1 deal at the Mernda pub." And that was our Kenny. That was our Kenny. Ken was and will remain a great Australian. Ken was and will remain a very loyal and patriotic Australian. If you visit our home not far from here, proudly the Australian flag flies in their front garden. And he loved it. He loved having views about being a great Australian, and he would remind me about what it takes to be a great Australian. We have 22 days before the state election. And Ken, you can rest easy knowing that we're going to work and work and work to honour the work that you've done for the Liberal Party. Because Ken used to say to me, there's plenty of time to sleep after an election. You have to work, and we will continue to work in your honour, Ken. To Margie and the kids and the grandkids, he is proud of you. Whilst he was a great Liberal, he was an even greater father and grandfather. And he did not hesitate for one moment to ensure that everybody who knew him and loved him were reminded of how proud he was of his children and grandchildren. I wish I had some of his integrity. Ken Wragg, you're a loyal mate, a dedicated mate, a committed mate, a sincere mate. And on behalf of all of your friends in the Liberal Party and beyond, we thank you, we will remember you, and we'll work in your honour.
Let's give everyone a great round of applause for the wonderful work they put into their speeches and memories today. Thank you so much. To continue with the storytelling, we are going to watch a DVD that's been prepared, and hopefully it triggers off a few more great memories and thoughts for each one of you.
Hey, true blue, don't say you're gone. Say you've knocked off for a smoker, and you'll be back later on. Hey, true blue. Hey, true blue. Give it to me straight, face to face. Are you really disappearing? Just another dying race. Hey, true blue. True blue. Is it me and you? Is it mom and dad? Is it a cockatoo? Is it standing by your mate when he's fight, or will she be right? True blue, I'm asking you. Hey, true blue, can you bear the load? Will you tie it up with wire just to keep the show on the road? Hey, true blue. Hey, true blue. Be fading. Is your heart still there? If they sell us out like sponge cake, do you really care? Hey, true blue. Is it me and you? Is it mom and dad? Is it a cockatoo? Is it standing by your mate when she's in a fight? Or will she be right? True blue, I'm asking you. Is it me and you? Is it mom and dad? Is it a cockatoo? Is it standing by your mate when he's in a fight? Or will she be right? True blue, true blue.
He was a giant when I was just a kid. I was always trying to do everything he did. I can still remember every lesson he taught me. Growing up, learning how to be like my old man. He was a lion. We were a father's pride, but I was defiant when he made me walk the line. He knew how to lift me up and when to let me fall. Looking back, he always had a plan. My old man. On his hands and dusty overalls, my old man. Now I finally understand. I have a lot to learn from my old man. I'm a giant, got a son of my own. He's always trying to go everywhere I go. Do the best I can someday wants to be like his old man. Trying to fill the boots of my old man. Oh man.
Got a little visitor down here. Hello, darling. Isn't that wonderful? Lots of wonderful memories, and I'm assuming it triggered off 1,000 more memories for each one of you. And I'm hoping that's what will happen today in the midst of the stories that have been shared. It'll just trigger off many, many more stories and memories from this time forward. He's been a part of each one of your history. He's influenced your life. And I've come to learn that when death parts us from people that have had an influence in our life, people that we care about, people that we rub shoulders with, I think if we're wise, we'll learn from the relationship. In fact, we'll learn from this very day as well. And I think it's when the important things in life become real. And I know that he's going to leave on in each one of your hearts and in your minds the stories and the memories that you have, and he's always going to hold that special place in your hearts. And when the final chapter of your life is written, you're remembered for what is truly important. And today I can truly say that he lived a life that was good, a life that was rewarding, a life that gladdened and enriched so many other people's lives, a life that we would say was the fruit of a good life. And today, being in a funeral service for Kenny, of course, we realise that life is so fragile and death is inevitable, and that he would want for each one of you to make the most of every moment and from this day forward. And as I mentioned before about that smile, he wants to be remembered with that smile today. So being in this service, being reminded about life and death, of how precious life really is, remembering his life today, I can't even think of anything better to do than to walk away from here being inspired by his life, taking hold of those things that you've seen, that you've admired and respected, the love, the energy that he had, taking hold of some of that and applying it in your own lives. And this world would become a great place if we're able to do that. I believe we've remembered his life with thankfulness, with gratefulness, with that beautiful amount of gratitude in there, and I think that is incredibly honourable for him today. So good job on everyone in the family in doing that as well. Would you please stand with me as we conclude the service? Now, directly after here, we will escort Kenny's coffin out to the hearse. There will be just a brief time for people to be able to catch up. Family will be heading off to the cemetery for a brief graveside service. But then you've been invited to the Sphinx Hotel. A great time to be able to catch up, support each other, and I'd love it if the family just had a few little beautiful things to be able to take away at the end of the day that will just help them through this difficult time today. I just wanted to take a brief moment of silence, though. I do believe we live in a busy world. There's things happening around us, and I know that most of you would not have had that opportunity to have said your own word of farewell. So I just wanted to take a few moments. This might be a time where you just remember his face. It might be a funny moment that you've shared. It might be the first time or even the last time that you remember sharing time with him. It might be actually a time where you'd like to say something to him, or for some it might even be a silent word of prayer. We'll do that just for 15 seconds and then we'll bring the service to a close. And I'm sure I can hear his voice saying to me right now, come on Aaron, wind it up. So that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to wind it up with a great song to end the service just the way he has wished it to be. Thank you.
Some things in life are bad, they can really make you mad.
Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, that grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. Hey, always look on the bright side of life. Come on! Always look on the bright side of life. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your scene, give the audience a grin. Enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow. So always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, keep 'em laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the right side of life. Come on, Brian, cheer up. Always look on the right side of life. Always look on the right side of life. Worst things happen to see, you know. Always look on the right side. I mean, what you got to lose? You know, you come from nothing, you're going back to nothing. What you lost? Nothing. Look on the right side of life. Nothing will come from nothing, you know what I say? Cheer up, you old bugger. Come on, give us a quiz. There you are. See? It's the end of the film. Incidentally, this record's available in the foyer. Someone's got to live as well, you know. All right, it's a lot. Let's get this place off there. Change this man within 3 weeks. What do you think pays for all this rubbish? Never made the money back, you know. I told him. I said to him, Bernie, I said, they'll never make that money back. I mean, what you got to lose? You know, you come from nothing, you're going back to nothing. What you lost? Nothing. Nothing will come from nothing, you know what I say? Cheer up, you old bugger. Come on, give us a quiz. There you are. See? It's the end of the film. Incidentally, this record's available